Hey everyone, and welcome to What the Tech. We're the show that cuts right through all the hype and the spin to give you tech news that you can actually use. And today, man, we are digging into a story that has the entire tech world buzzing, and for a really good reason. It's got Amazon, mysterious outages, and a pretty stark warning from one of the biggest names in tech. When a guy like Elon Musk, someone who was all about moving technology forward at lightning speed, boils his advice down to just 3 words, you kind of have to pay attention. So, what on earth would make a tech visionary put out a warning that's so simple, but so powerful? Well, it all goes back to an incident at one of the biggest tech companies on the entire planet.
That's right, we're talking about Amazon. A recent outage there basically pulled back the curtain on some of the hidden dangers in this AI gold rush we're all in. It turns out that old mantra of move fast and break things can have some pretty massive consequences. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what reportedly happened at Amazon. Then, we'll decode some of that engineering jargon you need to know. After that, we'll dive into the real risks of these AI coding tools, see how Amazon responded, and then, and this is the important part, we'll give you a real, actionable safety checklist. And finally, we'll zoom out and see what this all means for the tech industry as a whole. So let's start right at the beginning. Let's talk about the incident that got everybody's attention and triggered that warning from Musk. What exactly went down? So back in early March, big chunks of Amazon's site and their app just stopped working. We're talking over 22,000 users reporting problems. Now, officially, Amazon just called it a software code deployment. But behind the scenes, things were way more serious. A mandatory deep dive meeting was called to deal with what internal emails were calling a trend of incidents. Yikes. Now, in those internal communications, a couple of key phrases kept popping up: high blast radius and Gen AI assisted changes. And to really get a handle on the risk here, we've got to understand what the engineers are actually talking about. High blast radius, yeah, it sounds dramatic, and believe me, it is. The best way to think about it is like finding a tiny crack in a massive dam. It's a small change, maybe in just one little part of the code, that has the potential to cause a catastrophic failure across the entire system, hitting thousands, maybe even millions of users all at once. And Gen AI-assisted changes? Well, this is the technology that's right at the heart of this whole story. We're talking about code that was written or tweaked with help from AI tools. Things designed to make developers work faster and be more productive. But as we're about to find out, faster definitely doesn't always mean safer. And this right here brings us to the absolute core of the issue. Why would a tool that's designed to help developers actually end up increasing the risk of a huge outage? Well, the answer really lies in that gap between speed and context. You can see how this becomes a perfect storm. First, you've got an AI that might write perfectly good code, but it totally misses some unwritten, system-specific rule inside Amazon's gigantic architecture. Then, you've got teams that are under pressure to move fast, so they might just glance at that AI code instead of doing a deep, proper review. On top of that, the automated safety checks that companies already have in place, they might not even be built to catch the weird new kinds of errors that AI can introduce. And finally, with all the recent layoffs in tech, there are just fewer senior engineers around to act as that final backstop to spot a risky change before it goes live. Hey, just jumping in here for a sec. If you're finding this breakdown useful and you want more tech news that gets straight to the point, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. And hey, let us know what you think about this whole AI gold rush down in the comments. We read every single one. All right, so after the incident, how did Amazon respond? Well, this is where the story gets a little murky. There's a pretty noticeable gap between what was being said in internal reports and the company's official public statements. So, look, on the left you have the reports, which are citing internal emails. They talked about a mandatory deep dive for a trend of incidents, some of them linked to AI code, and new rules requiring senior sign-offs. But on the right, you have Amazon's public response. They said the meeting was just a regular weekly review, they denied any new sign-off policy, and said only one incident they talked about was even related to AI. We're just laying out both sides so you can see the whole picture. Okay, so regardless of what exactly happened at Amazon, this whole situation is a massive wake-up call. It brings up a super critical question. How can companies use these incredibly powerful AI tools without, as one expert put it, blowing up their own business? And the answer isn't to just stop using AI, it's to be a whole lot smarter about it. So the game plan really comes down to implementing some serious engineering controls. First, treat any code from an AI like you treat code from a third-party vendor, with a healthy dose of suspicion and a whole lot of testing.
Second, don't just push a change out to everyone at once. Roll it out in stages to small groups first. Third, for anything that you define as high risk, you have to get a senior engineer to sign off on it, period. Fourth, design your systems from the ground up so that one failure can't bring the whole house of cards down. And finally, you gotta keep records. Know which code was helped by AI so you can actually learn from your mistakes.
Look, this one incident at Amazon, it really points to a much, much bigger story. It's like a snapshot of this fundamental tension that's playing out across the entire tech industry right now, this constant battle between the need for speed and the need for stability.
So, at the end of the day, the takeaways here are for everybody in tech. This frantic push for AI-driven productivity is running headfirst into basic operational safety. And when you combine that with aggressive timelines and smaller teams because of layoffs, the danger just gets magnified. And the stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about more than just money. Major outages can destroy customer trust and even get regulators knocking at your door. When a giant like Amazon stumbles, you can bet the rest of the industry is watching very, very closely.
So here's the bottom line. AI coding tools are absolutely incredible. They can speed up development in ways we could only dream of a few years ago. But, and this is a huge but, they are not a replacement for careful, methodical engineering. They don't replace the need for deliberate processes, rigorous testing, and, most importantly of all, experienced human oversight.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to chew on. As every single company is racing to cram AI into every single product, are we all moving so fast that we're starting to forget the fundamental lessons of how to build safe, reliable systems? Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.